Hi, this is Michael Shevack, and welcome to GODSEARCH. This is podcast number 14. I'm getting a little tired of all this number symbolism, but hey, 14 is 2 times 7, and 7 is the number of perfection according to the biblical model. Very important. So, we're going to double the perfection of 7 and 14, and we're going to talk about something that is the number one thing on everyone's mind. I mean, we are talking value priorities here. Just as a reminder, value priorities are the basic guidelines that we follow when we are sowing and reaping and using our supernatural abilities to create what we'd like to experience in our lives. Value priorities are essential. Now, the first one, as we said, is health. The second is peace. The third is freedom. The fourth is wisdom. The fifth is the expression of your fullest potential. And the sixth is the one that obsesses everyone. I mean, we are obsessed with it. We are just cannot stop thinking about it. We take all the other value priorities for granted and we concentrate on number six, which is prosperity. Well, we can take the others for granted because our bodies know how to function. By and large, they know how to stay healthy. Peace in the absence of war is the normal state. All these things we take for granted, but we don't take prosperity for granted because we have to work for a living and we have this funny little thing called money that interferes very much for a lot of people with their spiritual experience of that we are calling God. And it's a shame. It doesn't have to. So let's unpack this issue of prosperity, which is value priority number six. It's sixth because it's not as important. If you don't have your health, you can have all the money you want and you're going to be miserable. But if you have your health and you have money, hey, good, rich or poor, it's nice to have money. So let's talk about it. First of all, let's get very deep and very subtle and very, woo woo. Little woo woo here is not going to hurt. You know, if you look around you, you'll see that there is no end to the prosperity around you. Everywhere you look, you find something. There's something there. In fact, good luck looking anywhere and finding nothing. It reminds me of, I think it's in Parmenides in Plato's books. All right. Plato is absolutely great. You should read Plato. Very easy to read, by the way. It's not fancy, even though people think, oh, Plato. He writes it completely, nakedly, and simply. All right. Not, it doesn't get lost in all sorts of fancy philosophical language. But Plato is very clear in Parmenides, where he says that not through Socrates, of course, he says that non-being is a form of being. Socrates trips someone up and says, so non-being is a form of being, which is another way of saying, look around you. There ain't no such thing as nothing. There ain't no such thing as nothing. Nothing doesn't exist. Oh, you may have a no thing, a particular thing which may be absent. And we'll talk about that. Could be food, could be clothing. These things can be absent, but nowhere in existence, in being itself, God being itself, is there absence. There's always something. Reality is teeming with prosperity. It's teeming with energy, life force, things, all sorts of stuff. That is the nature of the more sublime aspect of life. On the natural order, meaning the earth, well, there can be relative absence. You can have a famine. There can be a drought and no crops or no animal life can live. There can be actually in the natural order a shortage of people, a lack of reproduction, which is very common in the biblical narrative, where they're trying to repair the damage of previous degenerate life where they did not reproduce enough people. And reproducing people and having a lineage that is a continual flourishing of new life and new people and civilization in order to create agriculture and sharing and help with clothing and distribution of water and all the necessities is a very, very important thing. So in the natural order on the earth, there can be, let's say, natural evils such as a drought or a famine or a volcano erupting or fire. There can also be a lack of human participation on the historical order, meaning that there aren't enough human beings to work together. You see, when you're talking about prosperity, you're talking about two kinds of economies. One is a natural or physical economy, which has to do with food, which has to do with our bodies. And the other is a kind of metaphysical economy that has to do with ideas, human invention, sharing of something as simple as agriculture, this wonderful idea that we don't have to just live off of the blowing of the seeds through the wind and the sky and the accidental planting of these seeds upon the earth, but we can actually understand nature and use our supernatural abilities to plant them in a nice clean row and make more crops than earthly nature alone would do through our hands. This is the great gift of the human mind, you see. So there are two kinds of economy when we're talking about prosperity. One is physical and natural, and the other is metaphysical or supernatural, which is due to human creativity. They overlap in areas of agriculture and things like that, and they're overlapping now in the area of ecologically sound cars, but they're two different areas. Now, it's very interesting. Pay close attention. The word economy comes from the Greek, which means household. Household. Now, if you ever want to know what's wrong with the prosperity in our country or in your household or in your life, just remind yourself that household is the word economy. And you will find 100% of the time that when there's a problem with prosperity on any scale of human life, on any scale of nature, there is an inversion of value priorities. There is something that is out of whack. Something's out of whack. And the whole purpose of value priorities, which is why we're spending, 6 whole podcasts on it, is for you to be aware of the value priorities so that when you're using your ability to cause and effect, your ability that makes you a creator as you're in your human self, and when you're using your ability to cause and effect and measure per measure and sow and reap and you know, um, you know, create and manage your creations, because every garden needs to be tended, and you have to decide where the plants are going to go and what weeds are going to come out. When you're using these things, you have to be aware of the correct priorities in order to weave together the natural and the supernatural, the physical and the metaphysical, so you create the most prosperity out of life. When our economic system collapses, as we've discussed earlier, it's because we have forgotten that the foundation of prosperity is life. It's life itself. We have to focus up that life and engendering new life and healthy life, that is the foundation of a household, an economy, a household. And you will notice anytime there is a collapse on Wall Street and stuff, it is traceable to an inversion of value priorities. Someone forgot freedom or put freedom before your full, but after your expression of your full potential instead of before, or someone put prosperity before health and then had to pay all the medical bills. Value priorities are very important for making one conscious of the mechanism by which true spiritually oriented prosperity takes place. It's easy to make a buck. It's not easy to create a prosperity that is living, vibrant, alive, fulfilling, virtuous, and expansive, releasing the human being to the fullest of our spiritual potential, because prosperity is a tool for that. It's a very important spiritual tool. So let's just talk about economics for a bit. A lot of people debate this stuff on profit and profit. Well, they're making too much profit. They shouldn't be making profit. Profit's not this. Look, let me deal with profit. Okay. Let's suppose I have an apple tree. And on an apple tree, the apple tree usually sheds a certain amount of its apples. When they're ripe, they just kind of fall off the tree. And if you're around, you can pick up the apple and you can eat the apple and collect whatever apples have fallen and share them with your family that's closest to you. And that's really good. That's a normal, natural ability by which nature feeds you. Isn't that great? But with a little innovation, you can climb up the tree and you can pick more apples than would normally fall. You become an instrument by garnering more apples from the tree than the tree itself would release to you. And then you can come down, you can fill them in a basket. And then you have something very interesting. Think about it. It's very interesting. That apple that you have climbed up to the top of the tree in order to pick is no longer the same apple. Oh, yeah, sure. It's an apple and it belongs to the same species and all that stuff. But it's not the same apple because it has been, how do I describe it? Infused, even impregnated with human spirit. Your human spirit has combined with the spirit that's in nature to produce an apple that has been farmed, that has been taken from its tree by you, and more of these apples are now in your hands. Now, once you have that, you can go to someone else who similarly collected more fowl, FOWL, more birds, and you can trade your apples for the birds, or someone who has some skins from an animal that they can turn into shoes or sandals or whatever, and you can exchange your industriousness for their industriousness. Why? Because to nature has been added your particular spirit, and that apple is not just the apple. That skin is not just the animal's skin. Human life and human energy and human spirit infused itself into these natural products, and then you can exchange them, hopefully, as members of the same family. And then when you do so, you create an economy, a household, or you can exchange it with other households. And by scaling up, other communities, other nations, and indeed the entirety of the whole world. You see, so profit by its nature, is simply the infusion of human spirituality into the products that nature alone on the earth creates. That's what creates an economy. It is something other than what nature produces. It becomes something else because our spirit and natures have combined, and that allows us to share it. And that sharing, that bartering, is the foundation of prosperity. That's the foundation of prosperity. Profit is perfectly humanly natural. Everyone sits around debating. Is it communism? It's not profit. You shouldn't be profit. You should be owning it. The state should own it and distribute it. You don't have the right to profit. Profit's not the issue. No. Profit is perfectly natural, perfectly spiritual, perfectly based in and built into the design of reality. If you are Catholic out there, by the way, may he rest in peace, Pope John Paul II wrote an astonishingly luminous encyclical which continued the work of Pius, where profit as legitimate goal is the first sentence of the encyclical. It's a work of genius, and I would recommend that you look it up. Now, the problem with profit is that profit is not in and of itself the goal. It's a legitimate goal that if you're going to add your spirit into climbing up the tree and picking the apples off, that you can benefit by bartering and creating and participating in an expanded economy or household. It's legitimate. But here's the secret play. Pay close attention. The foundation of profit, of that kind of human infused prosperity, beyond what nature gives us, beyond the metaphysics of the fact that we're surrounded only by being and there is no not being, beyond that stuff, okay? The foundation of profit is service. I am performing a service to you by climbing the tree and getting the apple. You're performing a service for me by creating, my shoes. Service, the gift of giving, of sharing, of performing a task that benefits other people, that benefits your family, your household, the economy or household of our community, the economy or household, which is our nation and indeed our national friends, the nations we share with, that trade with, that kind of household is ultimately all humanity. It is service that is the foundation of prosperity. Now, in America, we like the mythology of believing that profit is the purpose. Profit motive, profit motive. Well, profit should be a motive. It's a legitimate natural product of natural law. It can motivate you. It should motivate you, of course. Why would you want to make shoes if you don't know how to make shoes when you like to pick apples and you can pick apples and exchange it for shoes? It's legitimate, but it's not the foundation of a spiritually awake experience called God through what we call economics. The foundation is service and sharing your life force. Sharing your life force. Life, again, is the foundation of it all. Life is the authority. Life is the basis of that spiritual experience we call God here on GODSEARCH. Life is the foundation. Now, just remember that once you have bartering and exchanging of life force, which has been infused or impregnated into the natural products and transformed through human imagination and our supernatural consciousness. You can then take it to the next stage of conceptual development. You can now create a measure for bartering, such as coins, such as China contributed to us, paper bills. And we are now moving slowly to digits. Computer digits are now, the measure of our currency. And bitcoins are now another measure. These are all measures, but be very careful. Remember, the foundation of it all is life and life force and service and bartering. The mistake people make, going back to podcast number 1, is idolatry. They seek the money, they seek the money, they seek the end result of the entire spiritual process. It's like seeking the end result of sex, where you're looking for the orgasm, but you're forgetting the artfulness around making love. So they seek the profit, the profit, the profit, the profit, the money, the money, the money, the money, the money. There's a certain amount of good to that because you're sharing. There's life force in it. It's not, evil. It's just not the purity of the spiritual experience called God. And it needs a little rebalancing, a little wisdom, care, truth, balance, the part of wisdom. Wisdom came first before prosperity for a reason. If you put the exchange of the measure called money before the service and the care and the balance, which is the wise usage that's necessary, or you forget that your full potential has to exist in your life, you could wind up enslaved in the very, very process of making money for the sake of freedom. And a lot of people have missed their dreams because of it, because they went in the route of garnering the money, but they forgot what their heart and their soul wanted them to experience out of life. So you have to be very, very careful when you're seeking prosperity that you do not forget the value priorities of health, peace, freedom, wisdom, the expression of your full potential. And our last one here is the 6th, which is prosperity. Now, it's obvious that prosperity doesn't depend, therefore, on money. It's obvious that it depends on life. It depends on nature. It depends on human nature transforming the things that are given to us on the earth and then sharing them. So it has to do with a really healthy and correct and beautiful human civilization. It has to do with correct values and therefore, pardon the R word, religious values, which when they are healthy and spiritually aligned, can really help our civilization see clearly. We could use some illumined religions these days, not the ones that are getting trapped in the theological politics of the past. Now, economic systems do not need to cause us problems and worries. The problems and worries of our economic systems are caused by the spiritual ineptness and the spiritual ignorance that goes into generating money. As I mentioned a couple of podcasts ago, when we had that great economic collapse a couple of years ago, well, someone came up with a stupid idea, all right, of taking defaulted mortgages and turning them into investments. And it had very little life value to it. And then it wasn't long before the entire economy, which had become too dependent on these investments, collapsed. Well, the economy was not the problem. It was the idolatrous idea of taking something worthless, turning it inside out and branding it as a value and passing the measure of the economy off as actual wealth when in fact it had no relationship to life, very little relationship to life. It had some, because everything does, right? But it was so deficient in life force that it couldn't sustain the economy. Now, let me tell you something. For those Wall Streeters or out there, what we commonly call cycles in Wall Street, from a theological point of view, indicates that the spiritual power of the human being is not fully present in the economy. You see, the whole idea of the theology of the West, and don't think it's dumb, even if you have some problems with authority issues and political issues with authority, or gender issues with males and all this stuff, but it's not dumb. The spirituality of Western civilization, which became the foundation of our entire world global system, is that the human being can be transcendent, a great word, transcendent, or can transcend the cycles of nature with our minds, meaning we are not simply restricted to birds, bees, and trees on Earth. Obviously so. We can go now to the moon. We can even imagine colonizing Mars. We are not restricted like other animals. If you look in the Bible, you'll see the environments on the earth call forth the animals that are appropriate to it. There is an intrinsic link between the animals that are called forth in Genesis. But when the human being comes, it's a direct creation of divinity to dust. The mediation of the environment is not there, which is a sign, not that we're supposed to be disconnected from nature. On the other hand, it's not that. It's that we're deeper. We're more connected to nature. We are connected to the foundational dust, to the earth out of which the animals and the plants and the environments arise. You understand? But going back to the Wall Street, when you are producing Wall Street cycles, it is because there is a consciousness of some kind of confusion, idolatry, and lack, and a misuse of the tool of money in a way that creates false absences in some arenas, which are compensated by excess in other arenas. And as we said in an earlier podcast, it's a mind crack. There's a mind crack when that is behind all of the unnecessary cyclings on Wall Street that is continuously confusing us. It happens also in everyone's life. You see, if we overly believe that, oh my God, there's no money here, oh, there's no money here, well, you create that lack. You believe that lack. You sow and reap that lack. And the way spirituality works, and we're going to talk about this in much more detail after we're through with value priorities and relationship priorities, what happens is you're going to sow and reap an experience of your own free will called lack in order to realize that, in fact, you were thinking that way, because that's how creative we are. We can experience our own belief in lack in order to realize that we are suffering from it, in order to wake up and realize that we don't need to suffer from it. But we'll talk about this more, because this is a very, very whole, gigantic area of knowledge, which has become very, very popular with, New Thought and The Secret and all sorts of abundance psychologies and even prosperity gospels, very, very big in the Christian church. But the important thing to realize is that economic systems are also our tools. They are human tools, and they are subject to the weakness of human beings. They're subject to them. We can make mistakes in them because they are ideas, they are concepts that we ourselves create. And the concepts that we ourselves create have flaws in them because we have mind cracks, we have emotional disturbances, we have confusions. We actually think there may be absolute 100% evil in a way that is a direct and equal competitor to God. These are the thinkings that people go through. So the core of prosperity, first of all, is to realize it's all around you. It's the nature of existence. The second issue is to realize that there is nature on the earth and there are things that we physically need that are essential things for maintaining our lives and the lives of all lives. And we are intertwined with our food supplies. We call them other creatures and other plants. We have to understand that that's the first order of ecology. If you're a religious person, the Hebrew Bible, or what some people call the Old Testament, it's a little different, it's been rearranged, but the Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament, deals with economy on a natural agrarian level. The spiritual texts of Christian scripture deal much more with the metaphysics around thought and possibility and faith, which are the foundations of a kind of symbolic economy of human beings, and therefore became very much the theology that amalgamated with the Roman Empire that created Western civilization. Okay? They're two different scales of economy, but the foundation is bodily and planetary. It is Hebrew Bible, Old Testament first, and then Christian scripture and New Testament follows upon it with a much higher order of intellectual subtlety, Greek thinking and the notion of substance, because substance is part of every single thing that exists, as we began the beginning of this podcast. Now, in your personal life, prosperity is important, but it is important to look at it in the context of reality. The reality is the health and well-being of your food and your body and the air you breathe and a certain amount of clothing and shelter is essential for life. And if you do not have what's essential for life, you're not going to have the well-being, the physical strength, and you're not going to have the basic creature comforts, because that's what they are, basic creature comforts, in order to be more ambitious, more entrepreneurial, more creative with ideas to help us expand our economy in larger, more creative ways, including the massive technological adventure that we are all on, which is rapidly changing the world and shrinking the world and expanding our abilities to create because we have much larger, more powerful tools. So when we think about our personal lives, it's always good to think about the earlier value priorities first. What is necessary for our health? Are we performing our tasks in a way that's peaceful, that we feel peace, engendering the right chemicals in our bodies to make ourselves feel happy and healthy? Are we feeling enslaved in the job that we have? Is it a job? Is it a job? Or is it a career, which is a job that is extended sometimes? Or is it a calling? Is it something where you're just feeling this incredible passion to get out there and create something and share it with the world, and of course receive back the measure of that spiritual energy that you're putting into, which is profit? Are you feeling that? In other words, it's important to take a look at the service you're providing and see whether or not you're providing something which is freeing you or enslaving you, making peace with you, or you're struggling, which is engendering your health, or whether it's hurting you. Think of all of the coal miners who had coal dust trapped in their lungs or asbestos trapped in their lungs. Yes, I'm not saying they did not provide for their family, and there's a certain nobility of going to war to provide for women and children. We men do it. And in an era of male bashing, by the way, we should be honored. But when you're in the middle of an industry that innately is going to make you sick and devalue the body that has been given to you by all of creation, this living, beautiful individualization of existence that your physicality is, one has to question the value of, again, putting money before health and the entire value priorities that are involved in our free enterprise system. Now, do not misinterpret this as socialism. You do not know who you're talking to. I'm a capitalist. Do not interpret this as, socialism. Just interpret this as common sense. Okay? Health is number one. We discussed that. After you have life, after air, water, and food, and little shelter. So you have to construct your own personal view of prosperity with the correct value systems. And unfortunately, if you're going to take lessons out from the world, or you're going to go on the internet to, imitate other people doing things which they're imitating other people, you're not going to get value systems that will create what we're after here on God Search, which are value systems that open you up to the deep experience of goodness on all levels, which we call God, the experience of good, which we call God. And that's what we're seeking here. Yes, profit's great. Yes, money is terrific. It's a wonderful, powerful tool of spiritual development. You can change things instantly with that tool. You can build hospitals and schools and free people from hunger. Money is one of the most powerful spiritual tools there is. It's condensed human spirit. It's condensed vibrancy of God's life force. It's very, very powerful. Very powerful. But its context is something much larger, much larger. Its context is life itself. Life itself. So don't get beguiled by all these things that people are talking about. Try to keep your household, your economic system, healthy, peaceful, free, with wisdom that includes care, balance, and truth. Always seek your full potential, because you can be as enslaved to a coin as any slave in Egypt in the Bible. And also seek prosperity, which is much larger than money. It's sharing of service, it's sharing of your life force to expand earthly nature, to expand it into a more supernatural realm, and then share it with other people to create human history and human civilization that amplifies the gifts we have been given in life, the gifts that we've been given on this planet. And it creates a human civilization which is sort of a meta household. It's the household over all households. And that's what we are driving for in our increasingly global world. Be careful, on the other hand, of improper competition. Improper competition, which pits you against another person. It pits your household against another household, where you are going for the resources and you don't care if they have it, because you have to survive. You have to put yourself first. Yes, you do. And we're going to talk about that. That's value priority. That's relationship priority number one. You got to put yourself first. But we're not going to talk about that out of context. But in the meantime, be very careful. What people extol the virtue of competition in a way where you are elevated and the other person is defeated is counterproductive to the wholeness and goodness of the God experience through your household and your expanded household, which is your community and your nation. Oh, competition's valuable. I'm not getting rid of it. But competition needs to be qualified in a spiritual way so it is vibrant and contributive to the goodness and the wholeness and the prosperity for yourself personally and for the entire world of which you are a part. But we need a little bit more learning to do so. But please go on to yourgodsearch.com. There's a couple of books in the publications section. It's nice. I wouldn't mind a profit. So thank you for giving it. The Six Fix is the most important book when it comes to that. We're going to discuss the other book at another time. But the Six Fix is the most important book if you want to understand value priorities and what we're going to do next, which is relationship priorities. And there's a little thing if you go on to yourgodsearch.com where you can contact me and ask me questions and I'll answer, and we can form a good personal relationship of teaching and learning and all that kind of stuff, which is a wonderful way for me to serve and participate in the economy of thought and the economy of knowledge, which is what we're doing here on God Search. So once again, always, this is podcast 14, 2 times 7, the magic perfect number of all creation by which in the Bible, God created everything within the cycle of 7. We discussed 7 earlier. This is 2 times double the force when we are talking about the distillation of all of the value priorities into prosperity, which is number 6. And you don't get better than that. If you're doing it all right and you're getting prosperity and coins out of the deal, it really reinforces you. You're a dog that got the bone and you're going to chew on it. And that's the way it's supposed to be when you have healthy, beautiful prosperity that's aligned to the God experience. So, hey, thanks for joining me. Uncover God, discover God, and please, in everything you do, including making money, including participating in this incredible, amazing, deliciously creative economy that we have, recover God, bring God into it. Bring God into it. Discover the laws of God and how God works and transform every single aspect of your life until it is brimming with goodness. This is Michael Shevack. Hey, keep your God search going. Remember, if you're alive, you're already on a God search, so you might as well learn how it works. See you next time. God bless.